Hello, everybody. Simon Dixon. I'm sure you've been experiencing, just like me, information overload and extreme swings in terms of how you're feeling as a result of the war that's currently happening in Israel and Gaza. It's broken my heart, but at the same time, it's lighted a fire in terms of what is the right thing to do as somebody that's watching this on the sidelines. And so immediately, my first thought was to do what I usually do, which is go to Twitter and express my thoughts around what is happening. This time, it led to such an emotional reaction that is totally understandable as a result of people that are deeply affected, both in Gaza and Israel and everywhere around the world. And my biggest fear right now is that this is about to escalate into something much, much larger. And so I wanted to record this so that I could first put on a few different hats. And if you're anything like me, you've probably been going from trying to process what is happening in the world to managing your normal life and also managing your different relationships with people that are seeing this from a very different perspective. And so that's why I wanted to go live this Friday. Now, I've been wearing several hats. The humanitarian in me is deeply, deeply hurt by what we see. And also the sheer observation of how our media completely played us, leading to people looking at this from completely different perspectives. It has been the biggest atrocity that I have seen is the way that the media reacted in order to control the narrative that I believe is going to lead to many, many more deaths and a completely different reaction as from what actually happened. Now, people start questioning people that I've known for years and people that I know in their core and their soul are not bad people. But all of a sudden, by believing in peace and by calling for de-escalation, people that know me to my core are calling me a terrorist empathizer. People are calling each other, for having a lack of empathy and sympathy for deaths, destruction. And suddenly, depending on which side you sit, what information you consume, we're being told that we're either, people that we thought are just completely ethical people that come from a ground of care and love and peace and unity. We're suddenly making accusations at them as if nothing we've known about them is true and that they're evil people that are not condemning what they consider to be atrocities and what are atrocities that are happening right now in what is being perceived, depending on what you're watching, as a one-way attack that is suddenly, because of the reaction of people, turned into a more fair version of what is happening right now. So with that in mind, I had several choices. The humanitarian in me is deeply affected by this. At the same time, I'm a financial commentator. Those that know me before 2011 know that all I used to talk about was the IMF and the World Bank and following the money and how atrocities are funded in a geopolitical sense, banking reform and monetary reform. Those that know me after 2011 will know me as a Bitcoiner because that's where I put most of my focus when I realized there wasn't going to be any change in the monetary and banking reform movement that was happening pre-Bitcoin. And so I focused on the exit from the traditional financial system. Those that know me, after 2022 will know that I've been deeply involved in a project to try and support victims that were suffering from a Ponzi scheme crime. And I was also one of those people that, had several $1 million on the line. So I took the time in order to work on that project. And so when they see me, they're saying, stick to your banking reform for those people. The other people are saying, stick to Bitcoin as I talk about this subject. The others were saying, stick to Celsius, which is the project I've been working on. And others, obviously, the second hat in me that was the Bitcoin commentator. The third hat in me is the CEO and co-founder of Bank to the Future, a company, a financial institution, and being told that, because I work for a company or a co-founder of a financial institution, I shouldn't talk about such topics. Well, that's not the world we live in today. And my faith means that I actually am obliged to talk about defending against injustice, suppression. And actually, if I believe that anything I can do can have any kind of influence, and I'm just a tiny cog in a ginormous system. But what we have seen is that everybody, by coming together and collectively committing to figuring out what the truth is, has been able to actually already influence at the highest level of political leadership. I saw the difference in what our leaders were saying, one-sided, to having to pivot because of an inhumane narrative, by not factoring in both sides of this equation and trying to think that this began as a simple terrorist attack. It certainly is not that simple, and it's a complete injustice, and it is actually going to lead to a complete, in my perspective, escalation at the very least everybody needs to be prepared for. I believe that all talk needs to be around de-escalation, and suddenly calling for peace has become an act of terror in some people's minds. There is certainly an information war and a media war, and I do believe that this military war is going to lead to a lot more death and destruction. And if we don't figure out how to de-escalate, this is going to escalate into something a lot more serious that I believe everybody needs to be prepared for. I'm then called and told that I need to censor what I'm saying based upon the media outlets that people are saying, and this whole challenge of the world we live in, where everybody has a voice on social media, where we can call into question what we're seeing in the traditional media, where that traditional media is being fed misinformation continually and pushing a certain narrative and agenda that we need to try and get on top of. And so my goal in doing a broadcast this Friday is to stay in my lane and talk about the things that I've dedicated the last 2 decades of my life to, which is following the money, monetary flows, preparing Bitcoin investing money, but combine it with the humanitarian side in me, so that we can really try and commit to getting to the truth. Now, what I don't want to do is pretend to be an expert in an area that I'm catching up on right now. And that is where we have an amazing, once in a lifetime kind of world that we've transitioned to, where we have access to the greatest experts. So if we want to go deep into somebody, like I've spent the last 2 decades of my life on the finance side and the Bitcoin side, but if I want to go deep into somebody that has spent the last 45 years on what's been happening in Israel and Palestine and Middle Eastern conflict and American military complexes and the British Empire, or whatever it may be, then we have access to those experts. And so I don't want to suddenly pretend to be an expert in something I'm not an expert in, but I do know how to follow the money and put together pieces. I've been working on doing that for a long time. And so where I am not an expert, I defer to others that have been equally on a mission in that particular area so that I can catch up and try and benefit from the conclusions that they have come to. This allows us to really, this allows us to get as informed as we possibly can, and triangulate information based upon those that really are the experts in those particular areas. And so while there may be accusations at me saying, stay in your lane, Simon, the humanitarian in me, if I see an injustice, then I must speak out. And when I speak out, I also get closer and closer to the truth. The easier thing for me to do is just to remain silent and follow the advice and follow the DMs and really, followed that type of thing. But I don't think that's the right thing to do. And my faith also says that I have to speak out against injustice and try and support suppression in all that I can, in any way that I can. And so, therefore, it's not for me to speak out. I even had to delete some tweets because of the offense. And I look back at those and I still stand by those tweets. But in order to be empathic with some of the things that people are going through, because death and destruction hurts us all equally as humans, no matter what the consequence and how it came to be. And as a human, we can all empathize with things that should never happen to any of us, any of our family, any of our loved ones, all of our brothers and sisters of different faiths and wherever we come from. None of these things should happen. And none of the religious scriptures even allow for many of these things that are happening, that are being often done in the name of religion and confused with geopolitical agendas, that are being mixed up with radicalism, that is being mixed up with faith, which is being mixed up with religious scriptures and everything that is coming in between. So this is a topic that I must talk about. And on Friday, I will talk about it. I'll be doing it from the perspective of staying in my lane, Bitcoin investing money. And I know that this is much, much greater than any of those topics. And financially, nothing matters financially when your life is on the line and much of the death and destruction. I speak every day from people, with people that are kind of in the middle of all of this, whether it be those that are unable to speak right now in Gaza, and I can only listen to their voices due to colleagues that I work with, that I have to work with every day, that are currently in the middle of Israel at the moment. But I think I can see the injustice amongst it. I think I can try and see through the weed. And where I get things wrong, I think publishing about it only leads to more information and those being able to point you in a slightly different direction. And where I'm not an expert, as I said, I will point to the people that I have come to love and respect or see as experts in those areas, so that we can try and cut through some of the noise, the agendas. One thing we do know is that we certainly can't trust those that are completely deep and biased, and we all have some kind of internal bias that we need to question. So this Friday, I'm going to be putting together a presentation. It's going to be for a few reasons. It's to try and at least explain my perspective of what I see and bring in some of the content from the experts that are there. I do believe that financially, we all need to be preparing for what comes next. And that has been my lifetime mission over the last 2 decades. So my primary focus will be on following the money, trying to use other experts to get to a version of the truth that makes sense for us, but also staying in my lane and covering it from some of the things that I think people need to protect themselves from. I do believe that this is a really a massive failure in leadership. I am finding it incredibly difficult to be associated with some of the leaders that claim to be representing the people of their country. And do not confuse people that get caught in the middle of this and are going to be victims as a result of this with the government agendas and the government voices that can only lead us to more separation, to more fake borders and lines that causes all these atrocities, when my personal faith only allows for us to serve humankind and see us from the humanitarian perspective. But I will also be talking about some of the things that you should likely be considering in order to protect yourself and prepare yourself for, because all I see right now is an epic failure from leadership that is going to lead to a lot more death and destruction, a lot more issues, and from my perspective, not solve any of the root causes that got us here in the first place. And that would be a tragedy. And if anything that I say influences somebody to try and progress in terms of what their thinking is and what they need to do next, then I have to speak up. I can't just be silent. I do have to call for peace. And at the risk of being called a terrorist empathizer, where I can't believe we have found ourselves in a situation where speaking out about what really appears to be right for you, from your perspective, for humankind, means that you have to suffer all types of allegations. I will not allow that to suppress what I believe and my commitment to trying to find the truth, be a part of the truth, and further humankind in any way that I can, and help people to prepare for what they think, for what I believe may come next, so that they can form their own opinions and we can further the conversation forward without, really just discounting ourselves as immoral human beings because we see something from a certain perspective. And so that is why I will be speaking out this Friday. And I will be sharing my perspective. It may be a longer broadcast. I'm a geek, a finance geek. I like to go into following the money, but please do not see this as me being insensitive to something that is way more important than money. And that is human life, our peace, our love, and our unity, and our relationships with each other. And I feel for anybody that has lost anybody that they love, as a result of these absolute failure in leadership being perpetuated by incredibly irresponsible media that is leading to us questioning our solidarity and our unity as a humankind. And so therefore, I will be speaking out. So I would like to see you this Friday. I'll be uploading this to my YouTube video, my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon. And I will see you on the other side on this Friday. We always want to do this with peace, love, unity. And I know that many people think that that is complete ignorance given in the current environment, but I will not give up on that. And I do believe that we need to do anything we can to stop the death, destruction, and complete atrocity of financial flows that are only going to go to military industrial complexes and just cause more harm to the world in a time when we have access to information that can stop such things and the ability to influence our leaders and let them know that that does not represent what we want, whatever that may be, with peace, with love, with unity. I'll see you on the other side on Friday. Peace. This is how real leaders speak.
My friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is how Muslims and Arabs greet others, with a wish for the other to be blessed with peace and the mercy of God. Our region came with a message of peace, the Pact of Umar, issued at the gates of Jerusalem almost 15 centuries ago, more than 1,000 years before the Geneva Conventions, ordered Muslim soldiers not to kill a child, a woman, or an old person, not to destroy a tree, not to harm a priest, not to destroy a church. Those are the rules of engagement that Muslims must accept and abide by, as all those who believe in our common humanity. All civilian lives matter. My friends, I am outraged and grieved by those acts of violence waged against innocent civilians in Gaza, in the West Bank, and Israel. The relentless bombing campaign underway in Gaza, as we speak, is cruel and unconscionable on every level. It is collective punishment of a besieged and helpless people. It is a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. It is a war crime. Yet the deeper the crisis cuts of cruelty, the less the world seems to care. Anywhere else, attacking civilian infrastructure and deliberately starving an entire population of food, water, electricity, and basic necessities would be condemned. Accountability would be enforced immediately, unequivocally. And it has been done before, recently, in another conflict, but not in Gaza. It's been 2 weeks since Israel put in place the complete siege of the Gaza Strip, and still, for the most part, global silence. Yet the message the Arab world is hearing is loud and clear. Palestinians' lives matter less than Israeli ones. Our lives matter less than our lives. The application of international law is optional, and human rights have boundaries. They stop at borders, they stop at races, and they stop at religions. That is a very, very dangerous message, as the consequences of continued international apathy and inaction will be catastrophic on us all. My friends, we cannot let raw emotions dictate the moment. Our priorities today are clear and urgent. First, an immediate end to the war in Gaza, the protection of civilians, and the adoption of a unified position that indiscriminately condemns the targeting of all civilians in line with our shared values and international law, which loses all value if it is implemented selectively. Second, the sustained and uninterrupted delivery of humanitarian aid, fuel, food, and medicines to the Gaza Strip. Third, the unequivocal rejection of the forced displacement or internal displacement of the Palestinians. This is a war crime according to international law and a red line for all of us. This conflict, my friends, did not start 2 weeks ago, and it will not stop if we continue down this blood-soaked path. We know all too well that it will only lead to more of the same, a zero-sum game of death and destruction, of hatred and hopelessness played on repeat. Today, Israel is literally starving civilians in Gaza, but for decades, Palestinians have been starved of hope, of freedom, and a future. Because when the bombs stop falling, Israel is never held accountable. The injustices of occupation continue, and the world walks away until the next round of violence. The bloodshed we are witnessing today is the price of that, of failing to make tangible progress towards a political horizon that brings peace for Palestinians and Israelis alike. Israeli leadership must realize that there is no military solution to its security concerns, that it cannot continue to sideline the 5 million Palestinians living under its occupation, denied of their legitimate rights, and the Palestinian lives are no less valuable than Israeli lives. The Israeli leadership must realize, once and for all, that a state can never thrive if it is built on the foundations of injustice. Over the past 15 years, we have seen how the dreams of a two-state solution and the hopes of an entire generation have turned into despair. This has been the policy of hardline Israeli leadership to focus solely on security over peace and create new illegal realities on the ground that render an autonomous Palestinian state unviable. In the process, it has empowered extremists on both sides. But we must not, we cannot write off this conflict as too far gone for the sake of both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Our collective unified message to the Israeli people should be: we want a future of peace and security for you and for the Palestinians, where your children and Palestinian children should no longer live in fear. It is our duty as the international community to do whatever it takes to restart a meaningful political process that can take us to a just and sustainable peace on the basis of the two-state solution. The only path to a safe and secure future for the people of the Middle East and the entire world, for the Jewish people, for Christians, for Muslims alike, starts with the belief that every human life is of equal value, and it ends with two states, Palestine and Israel, sharing land and peace from the river to the sea. The time to act is now. Thank you. شكرا لكم جميعا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Jordan is home to 40% of the total registered Palestinian refugees in the Middle East, according to the UN. That is simply a huge number, especially for a small country. Jordan's Queen Rania is herself of Palestinian descent, and she's joining me now for a world exclusive from Amman, the capital. Queen Rania, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Christian.
Can I ask you first, as an Arab, as a Palestinian, as a human being, a mother, how you're feeling ever since October 7th?
Well, look, Christian, I cannot begin to describe to you the depth of the grief, the pain, and the shock that we are feeling here in Jordan. All of us are united in this grief, regardless of our origin. We are just can't believe the images that we're seeing every single day coming out of Gaza. We're going to bed seeing those images and waking up to them. You know, I don't know how to, as a mom, we've seen Palestinian mothers who've had to write the names of their children on their hands because the chances of them being shelled to death, of their bodies turning into corpses, are so high. I just want to remind the world that Palestinian mothers love their children just as much as any other mother in the world. And for them to have to go through this is just unbelievable. And equally, I think the people all around the Middle East, including in Jordan, we are just shocked and disappointed by the world's reaction to this catastrophe that is unfolding. In the last couple of weeks, we have seen a glaring double standard in the world. When October 7th happened, the world immediately and unequivocally stood by Israel and its right to defend itself and condemned the attacks that happened. But what we're seeing the last couple of weeks, we're seeing silence in the world. Countries have stopped at just expressing concern or acknowledging the casualties, but always with a preface of declaration of support for Israel. And, are we being told that it is wrong to kill a family, an entire family at gunpoint, but it's okay to shell them to death? I mean, there is a glaring double standard here, and it is just shocking to the Arab world. This is the first time in modern history that there is such human suffering, and the world is not even calling for a ceasefire. So the silence is deafening, and to many in our region, it makes the Western world complicit, through their support and through the cover that they give Israel, that it is just its right to defend itself. Many in the Arab world are looking at the Western world as not just tolerating this, but as aiding and abetting it. And this is just horrendous, and it's deeply, deeply disappointing to all of us.
Queen Rania, I'm going to ask you more about this and go deeper into this, into your feelings about this. But first, I want to ask you, the Israelis are shocked to their core, the grief, what happened to them has never happened in that way since the Holocaust. And they are shaken to their core, as I said, and the grief. I just want to get from you what you felt on October 7th.
Well, of course, I was shocked. And, Jordan has made its position very clear. We condemn the killing of any civilian, whether Palestinian or Israeli. That is Jordan's ethical and moral position. And it's also the position of Islam. Islam condemns the killing of civilians. As my husband mentioned recently, the Pact of Omar, which was issued on the gates of Jerusalem 15 centuries ago, that's 1,000 years before the Geneva Conventions, orders Muslims not to kill a woman, child, or elderly person. and not to destroy a tree or hurt a priest. And so this is what we believe are the rules of engagement at time of war, but they need to apply to everybody. So yes, there was the shock and there is the condemnation, but why isn't there equal condemnation to what is happening now? I just want to emphasize that what happened on this conflict did not begin on October 7th, although it has been being portrayed as that. You know, most networks are covering the story under the title of Israel at War. But for many Palestinians on the other side of the separation wall, on the other side of the barbed wire, war has never left. This is a 75-year-old story, a story of overwhelming death and displacement to the Palestinian people. It is a story of an occupation under an apartheid regime that occupies land, that demolishes houses, confiscates land, military incursions, night raids. You know, the context of a nuclear-armed regional superpower that occupies, oppresses, and commits daily documented crimes against Palestinians is missing from the narrative.
Queen Rania?
You know, for too long, Palestinians' life...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to ask you a specific question because you're using a lot of words which clearly many in your, you know, in the Arab world have used, words like apartheid and the rest. But you know that you are going to come under a lot of criticism from Israel and its supporters. And I'm wondering whether you're coming out to speak...
But let me just emphasize that apartheid is a designation that was given not by Arabs, but by Israeli and international human rights organizations.
You wrote in an Instagram story just in the last week, it isn't self-defense if you're an occupying force, and you show the destruction of Gaza. And you have posted a video of yourself from a presser in 2009 during that war, saying, it is heartbreaking to see how little has changed. The world cannot remain silent. This has to stop. Do you feel that you have a particular voice, you know, as Queen of Jordan, in a country that has a peace treaty with Israel, to speak up?
It's not about me, it's about speaking up for humanity. You know, this is not about, you know, being pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. This is about choosing the people, the everyday people on both sides. And, you know, and explaining again that the Palestinian people have for too long been living under oppression and a dehumanization. You know, they suffer daily indignities and human rights violations, whether they're being jailed or humiliated or harassed. They do not have freedom of movement. There are over 500 checkpoints scattered all over the West Bank. You have a separation wall, which is deemed illegal by the International Court of Justice, that has separated the territories into 200 disconnected enclaves. And, you know, you've seen the aggressive expansion of settlements on Palestinian land. And those have interrupted the territorial contiguity of the territories and has deemed an autonomous, independent Palestinian state not viable. So you are seeing all these, this is the background of this conflict. There's a hyperfixation on Hamas now because of what happened the last couple of weeks. But this is a problem that far precedes Hamas and will continue after Hamas. This is a fight for freedom and for justice. And that is what needs to be heard.
Can I ask you this question then? Because, you know, quite a brave, I think she's Saudi anyway, a journalist on the Saudi television network Al Arabiya, took this and hammered Khalid Mashal, the former head of Hamas, and said to him, the butchery, well, that's my word, but she said, what everybody's seen on their screens has, you know, turned the world away from the Palestinian cause. And just to expand, people are saying Hamas and what it did has brought this down on these poor people of Gaza. Do you accept that?
Well, I do not believe in, as I said, in the killing of civilians. But this is a story of violence that has been going on now for so long. And this violence needs to be condemned. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing today and what people need to understand is that, yes, you know, under the guise of the right to defend itself, we are witnessing atrocities. Every country has a right to defend itself, but not through any means, not through war crimes, not through collective punishment. 6,000 people, civilians killed so far, 2,400 children. How is that self-defense? We are seeing butchery at a mass scale using precision weapons. So for the past 2 weeks, we have seen the indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza. Entire families wiped out, residential neighborhoods flattened to the ground, the targeting of hospitals and schools and churches and mosques and medical workers, journalists, UN aid workers. How is that self-defense? Why is it that whenever Israel commits these atrocities, it comes under the banner of self-defense, but when there's a violence by Palestinians, it is immediately called terrorism? Is the word terrorist just reserved exclusively for Muslims and Arabs?
Well, let me ask you then,
there's a real double standard here that we're seeing.
Your husband, King Abdullah...
And there's also a false symmetry that we see.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. Your husband, King Abdullah...
There's a false symmetry because these are not two equal people in the conflict. One is an occupier and one is the occupied. One has a military, one of the mightiest in the world, and the other doesn't have a military at all. So there is a false symmetry here that is being drawn. And there's also, when you say the right to defend itself, that does not say the entire story. It doesn't say the story of the violation of international law, international humanitarian law. It doesn't tell you the suffering and the story of an occupation. Israel is in violation of no less than 30 UN security resolutions that require it and it alone to act, to withdraw from territories occupied in 1967, to stop the settlements, the separation wall, the human rights violations. This is at the crux of this issue. It is not this hyperfixation on Hamas.
Can I ask you, to sort of elaborate, because your husband, King Abdullah, I believe it was last weekend, at the summit of Arab leaders in Cairo, he said, the message the Arab world is hearing is loud and clear. Palestinian lives matter less than Israeli ones. Our lives matter less than other lives. I know you've said a lot about, your feelings about what's going on right now, but do you think in general that's true, that even world leaders and others, and you meet a lot of them, and so does the king, which is why he said that, I assume?
Well, like I said, it has been very disappointing to see the double standards in the world today, to see that the strong condemnation of what happened on October 7th, but very little condemnation of what is happening today. Why isn't there a call for an immediate ceasefire? We are seeing staggering human suffering happening today. Why is the narrative always skewed towards to the Israeli side? The Western media and policymakers are quick to adopt the Israeli narrative. When Israel attacks, Palestinians die. But when Israelis die, they are murdered in cold blood. It's a massacre. So even like on October 7th, we've seen the situation described as savagery, barbaric, bloodthirsty, cold-blooded, But we're not seeing that terminology being describing the situation today, even though the atrocities are of greater magnitude. I'm not arguing accuracy, Christian. I'm arguing equivalence and double standards here. When the President of the United States is told that he has evidence, he has seen evidence of children beheaded, only to retract because the IDF said that there's no proof of that. That is confirmation bias. Even at your network, Christian, the CNN website at the beginning of the conflict reported a headline of Israeli children found butchered in an Israeli kibbutz. And when you read through the story, hasn't been independently verified. Now, my question to you, would you publish such a damning yet unverified claim made by a Palestinian?
Queen Rania, I just need to stop you right there, because there have been pictures shown by the Israelis, and our journalists have been down there. I'm not talking about beheadings. I'm talking about babies' bodies riddled with bullets and things. But let's it is just all so horrible, as you say. I want to ask you about what Jordan has said and your husband, the king, has said, that there is a there has been anyway an attempt or suggestion to move Palestinians who are trying to seek safety either into Egypt or into Jordan, your country. And the king has said this is a red line. I think the plan by certain of the usual suspects to try and create de facto issues on the ground. No refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt.
Well, look, the people of Gaza now are facing two choices. Either they leave or they face death or collective punishment. So essentially, they're giving a choice between expulsion or extermination, between ethnic cleansing and genocide. And no people should be given, have to face that kind of choice. And what my husband was referring to is the people of Palestine of Gaza should not be forced to be moved again. Most of the residents of Gaza are already refugees. And right now, at least 1 million have been displaced from their homes. So we do not want another mass displacement of Palestinians like what happened at the Nakba in 1948. And that's what my husband meant about this being a red line. The Palestinians have the right to remain on their land.
Yeah, because they were concerned about so-called forcible transfer and never being allowed to come back. There have been quite a lot of protests in your own country, as in many other parts of the world. And you have explained what is shaping up, and that is a very different narrative about what's happening depending on what part of the world people come from and certain leaders come from. There's a most definite taking of sides that's absolutely going on, as you illustrated. What about, though, or are you kind of used to it now and have to manage it, the protests on the street, even against the 1994 peace treaty? Are you concerned about the anger and the wider war or the wider instability in countries like yours or in others around the region?
Well, you would be concerned if there's division, but we are absolutely united in our stance. We all believe in the same thing. We are all feeling the same pain. We all want the same thing. And so I think there's a lot of unity in the Arab world. And as I said, there is a sense of, do our lives matter less? You know, why is it that when people are coming to represent, the Palestinian issue, at the top of an interview, they have to have their humanity cross-examined. They have to present their moral credentials. You know, do you condemn? And we don't see, Israeli officials being asked to condemn. And when they are, people are readily accepted our right to defend ourselves. I have never seen a Western official say the sentence, Palestinians have the right to defend themselves. And so, we are seeing this. When, even in Western democracies, freedom of speech is apparently a universal value, except when you mention Palestine. When people gather in support of Israel, they're exercising their right to assembly. But when they gather for Palestine, they are deemed terrorist sympathizers or anti-Semitic. So you're seeing these double standards. And it's creating a lot of disillusionment in the Arab world and in many who are just seeing the injustice. And I just want to emphasize, Christian, that at the end of the day, there is no military solution to this issue. Wars are never won. There are always losses on all sides. Victory is a myth that politicians make in order to justify immense loss of life. There can only, even if Israel goes and defeats every last, or kills every last Hamas member, then what? Haven't they left a trail of terrible memories, horrific memories, that will just create a new generation of resistance that is fiercer and more violent? Because, at the end of the day, you can only have a political resolution to this. And my husband has for so long always emphasized that there can be no peace and stability in the Middle East without a political resolution. So even if you're an ally to Israel, you are doing it no service by giving it blind support.
Well, we hope
expediting and expanding the provision of lethal weapons to Israel is only going to expand this conflict. It's only going to prolong and deepen the suffering. There can never be a resolution except around the negotiating table, and there's only one path to this, and that is a free, sovereign, and independent Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. That is the only path that's gonna get us there.
Many analysts are already talking about that, and we hope that something like that can emerge from these ashes and this catastrophe. Queen Rania, thank you so much indeed for joining us.